Hello, everybody. This is GeorgeAnn Hughes, and this is the Byte Show. And we're very blessed to have Yusef Battle with us. Yusef is with the Word of Revelation Ministry, and you can contact him at the Word of Revelation Ministry, Post Office Box 6602 in Columbus, Georgia. The zip code is 31917. And the telephone, if you'd like to call and talk to Yusef, you can leave a message and he'll return your call. It is 706-689-9004. And Yusef was talking to us about God and science, and this will be part 2. So, a lot of times we run into people who have either been brainwashed with certain doctrines concerning evolution, that type of thing, and we will jump up and down and say, no, that's not right, listen to this, and that doesn't get us very far with that person. So here's some tools that, pay attention, get a notepad, take some notes, because Yusef is really, he is well versed in this topic. Hi, Yusef.
Hello.
So good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm back, too. It's a privilege, I tell you.
Oh, yeah, we almost got you last time, and I told Pastor Jefferson, I said, you tie that boy to the chair. I said, don't let him get away again. I just missed you by less than 5 minutes. So, what about this? Let's go a little deeper into this evolution situation.
Okay, well, last time, of course, we talked a little bit about the history of it,
yes.
And, how around the turn of the century or so, turn of last century, I should say, up until that point, science had been predominantly run by Christians, men who actually believed that there was a God, that there was a God out there who was responsible for everything. In fact, I didn't mention this last time, but most of your scientists at that point actually believed in something that they call the ether. That word is spelled A-E-T-H-E-R or E-T-H-E-R. I think it's a Latin derivative. It simply means substance. The ether luminiferous is the formal term for it. But what these guys believed was that all things were held together in this substance, this medium called the ether. It was pretty much like, if you had a swimming pool that was full of water and you had some balls in there, the objects are basically like the little balls in there, and if they were submersed down underneath the water, everything was flowing around it. That would be the ether. Not only that, but if somehow you were able to, those balls were hollow and the water could flow through them, the ether, or the water in this case in the illustration, will be flowing through them. So they believe this. They believe everything that existed inside of this substance called the ether. They believe that everything actually had that ether flowing through it. And of course, for a lot of Christians, especially those who have read the Bible and are kind of familiar with the Scriptures, that can start to sound familiar. For example, when the Apostle Paul was talking to the Greeks at the Areopagus, he actually made the statement in Acts chapter 17 that in him, meaning God, we live and move and have our being. Very, very, very powerful statement. Also, Colossians chapter 1, Apostle Paul is writing. He actually makes the statement that in him, meaning God, all things cohere or consist or have their being. So you see two instances where the same apostle is inspired by the one Holy Spirit to make it clear that we're in God and God is in, flowing through us. Not just, of course, like most Christians think of it in terms of the Holy Spirit actually manifesting in us when we receive Jesus Christ, but in all things. Everything is held together in God, and all things are in God. So, and needless to say, these Christian scientists right around the turn of the last century were examining this thing. They were studying this whole thing, and something went terribly, terribly wrong. And we can talk about that in a lot of detail maybe later or sometime other than this. But at any rate, what ended up happening was these guys ended up, meaning the scientists, going to this thing where they slowly begin to turn away from the ether state. Of course, Michelson-Morley, very famous science experiment, they allegedly proved that there was no such thing as the ether. Now, that's actually not true. A guy by the name of Sagnac, French scientist, actually proved that it was there. But I won't get too much into that right now. But at any rate, what happened was right around the turn of the last century, these guys began to flip from being predominantly Christian in thought to secular in thought, even going so far as to be atheistic in thought. And one of the things that did that was evolution. It was the sort of the tool that a lot of these guys used to promote their false doctrine. I talked about it last time I was with you, that a lot of the guys who were involved in evolution, at least in the founding of evolution or popularizing evolution, I should say, were occultists. They were spiritists. These guys practiced witchcraft. They practiced all kinds of ungodly things. They were heavily involved in it. Even Charles Darwin himself, although it wasn't necessarily indicated that he was heavily involved in it, he was involved in it. He did have some very strange experiences on his infamous trip on the Beagle right before he got to the Galapagos Islands, and then when he got back, there was definitely something wrong with him. He had all types of mental problems and serious breakdowns and issues right up until his death, when it is believed that he actually got saved right on his deathbed, largely in part due to his wife. I believe she was still a Christian. So you see this thing where these guys changed the face of science, and for almost 150 years, science has been predominantly considered a secular institution, although it did not start that way, although it certainly wasn't carried out that way at a certain point, but that's what happened. Well, anyway, what ends up happening is when most saints come to receive the Lord, even if they're not necessarily scientifically trained, they've been through the educational system, and we talked about how the textbooks will have this evolutionary thought and this evolutionary mindset. I call it an evolutionary theology, for lack of better words, woven throughout the textbook. It's as if this thing has already been decided. This is a fact. This is a law. That's not true at all. Evolution is just at most a theory, meaning a belief system that scientists have. They try to use it to explain certain things that occur in nature, and at worst, it's just some type of foolishness that somebody made up, and it doesn't have any credence at all. And I believe we can actually give some of the basis for making the case for that. Well, at any rate, what happens with most Christians is that they've been tunneled through an educational system that's predominantly secularistic as well as evolutionary in thought, and so they kind of have this double mindedness about themselves, whereby on one hand they embrace the Bible, but on another hand, at a deeper level, they reject a lot of the claims of the Bible, especially when it comes to the creation story. A lot of people in seminary actually refer to it now as the creation myth.
Oh,
they don't call it the creation story. No. No, I've read lots of periodicals where they call it the creation myth. I've read some things as outlandish as it might seem to the informed audience, whereby there are authors who try to merge evolution with creation. They try to say that, during the 7 days, they take the verse kind of in an offbeat sort of way that, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, 1,000 years like a day. So what they try to say in so many words is that the millions and millions of years that it took to create all things slowly, God did that gradually through the evolutionary process. I actually read a book like that. This is how far out there it gets, and that's, seminary-trained theologians, scholars, future preachers, teachers, evangelists, or prophets of the gospel. They have this stuff in them. Well, at any rate, if these guys are confused to that extent, what do you think is happening to, the average believer out there in the pew or in the chair, on Sunday morning? What's going on with them? Well, what ends up happening is one of two things, if not both. One, they have this sort of thing whereby they live this kind of, fleshly, kind of naturalistic life because they're surrounded by naturalism, and that's all they know. And they try to mix that with the gospel. I think that's where you get a lot of your so-called prosperity doctrines from now. A lot of this this sort of thing that's kind of crept in, whereby people are focused on the material instead of on the heavenly. And, you know, it says in Colossians chapter 3, set your affections on things above, not on things below.